let's get into it. I think my screen is visible. Maybe not. Yeah. Bit of housekeeping as we get into it. Just make sure your Who's the Ref availability is is being confirmed, and make sure you're also confirming your assignments. If you don't know how to do that, get in touch with Scott or your regional officers. So Tim, Sean, or Drew. Excuse me. Tech zone protocols. Let's make sure we're following the protocols. The teams all know this, and they know what they're supposed to do. We'll get to a little bit of that. Confirmation emails. If you're not getting emailed by the teams, please reach out to them or reach out to Scott or, again, the regional officers to make sure they are confirming with you. And then please sign the code of conduct as soon as possible if you have not done that. During the week, again, coach confirmation, Wednesday night, Thursday morning. Respond with match confirmation template, include the ARs, confirm any other necessary details. So you should have gotten an email from me recently with that confirmation email. Make sure the links all work, so it should be fine. If you click through everything, then you should be getting, you click through the tech zone, then it should come up. Hopefully you don't download a virus. And then, it should take them to stuff like this, so you'd be good to go. So, pretty straightforward. We talked about match day procedures as a group. This is just something that all three regions agreed upon. So in this situation, kickoffs at 1 is pretty straightforward. Take a screenshot of this if you want. Kickoffs at 1, we want to arrive at noon at the latest. Just making sure we've covered that, and we're either meeting with the coaches or inspecting the field first. Getting our pre-match out of the way, but please be accommodating to the team's wishes. So you could even do that in the pre-match email. As to when they want you to speak with them. Some of them might be an hour before, some of them might be 30 minutes before. Just be accommodating to them. You don't want to be intrusive on their warm-up. Pretty straightforward in that. Get your pre-match chat out of the way. Coin toss, all of that. Radio, solo shot setup if you have it. AR briefing. Ideally, you would if you knew you had ARs, you know who they are, give them some notes in the week. It's really difficult to give somebody a whole lot of information 10 minutes before they're going to go run onto the field because they're probably going to forget it. So just keep that in mind when you're dealing with ARs. Either keep it simple if you're going to be right before the meeting, before the match, otherwise, give them some time ahead to digest that information. And, last thing, warm up if you want to do that. Probably a good idea. Vitamin I, whatever, slather on the icy hot like we said, and then kickoffs at 1. Really the theme around this, excuse me, the theme around this is you want to give yourself enough time to get everything done. So if you're pitching up 30 minutes before kickoff and you're trying to rush and you're trying to get things sorted and you got issues with the field, it's not going to work. So please give yourself enough time to get there and sort yourself out. Scott, would you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, what I would say about the hour before the match is this is a really good time for the referee to build rapport with some key players in the team, and so not to be overlooked. So it's a great time to build your rapport there. With as far as your AR brief, you can think about sending out an email with some thoughts on it on the Wednesday. If you're reaching out to the teams, you can also reach out to your ARs via email. It's a good way to sort of let them know what you're looking for and what sort of support you're after, so they can sort of think about it before the match as well. And if you're going to do a warm-up, try not to do it in the middle of the field.
Yeah.
It's always a good way to do it, so to bring less attention to yourself. But apart from that, it's a good procedure.
Yeah, just the key thing really is give yourself enough time, because as you can see, you got a lot of things to do. Some of the regions thought inspect the field might be a good idea to do that first, and then meet the coaches. Point around inspecting the field, especially in Texas, or I guess in the U.S. in general. There's a lot of fields with a lot of different lines, even at the highest level. So it's a good idea to just make sure everything's marked properly. There's enough, the corner flags are in the right spot. What color the lines we're going off of. So you might have the touch lines might be yellow, the try line might be blue. The halfway line might be the soccer line. Who knows? It's just a good idea if you're not familiar with the pitch to get there as early as you can, build some rapport with the players and the coaches, and see what you have to work with. Also, kind of just making sure you at least have a look at what the players are wearing. We included the protective equipment guideline. Something that we put together for USA a couple years ago. This is just a simplified version. Just make sure you're having a look at what these guys are wearing and ladies. A lot of football gear being worn, especially at the high school level. Any of this stuff with like plastic clips, these shoulder straps, the football gear with the the rib protectors and whatnot. It's just a good idea to have in your mind as to what they're wearing. And we're not asking to like check what's under jerseys, but if you see knee braces, especially elbow braces, ankle braces with these metal or hard plastic clips, you need to have a word with these players. If they have a medical personnel there, tell them they can't wear it. It's basically, tape or this neoprene sleeves. Those are fine. But if it's got any kind of hard plastic or metal, it's got to go. And like we said, give yourself enough time to get that out of the way if you have any issues. Probably one of the worst things. I've experienced this as well, aside from finding it on the field, but right before kickoff when you tell somebody, hey, they got to remove a massive, ankle brace, and the player starts freaking out, and it's just something you can avoid as much as you can. Again, it doesn't matter what the level is. We've seen it at the highest level here. It's just a good idea to get your head around it. So we're done with the match day procedures. We're all good there. We sent out a little video. We showed a video that the RFU brought out a couple weeks ago. We'll put that in the webinar playlist. I'm not going to play it tonight. It's just talks about player interaction. There's some very interesting acting going on, but captain interaction is kind of one of our big things we want to discuss tonight. So we'll just go through this one real quick.
Time off. Here. Captain. David's getting really frustrated with one of the America's select players. And that's a relief. I thought was a bit unlucky there. He skidded. He just sort of skidded on the grass. I think if he'd had traction, he would have got over. Have a word, yes, please. So the referees had a word with the America's Selects captain, just asking him to talk about discipline.
Goal line. Goal line. Behind the goal line. Thank you.
Yeah, so when we're talking about working with the captains, you want to make sure you're explaining what's happening, you're giving them an out. You're telling them what needs to change, and you're explaining what you'll do if they don't fix it. This bottom part here, every interaction with a captain has either a positive or a negative effect on that relationship. So in terms of dealing with captains, there's a formal and there's an informal approach. Formal being you're addressing players as captain. You're keeping it business-like on the field. Informal, you might use first names with certain players or with the captains. You want to be careful about showing favoritism on the field. Make sure you have an even approach. If you go back in this clip, penalty is for a breakdown infringement. There's a couple of penalties against that white team where they're under pressure, so the referees decided he needs to manage that team. However, the actions of the blue 9, which happens to be the blue captain, are just not acceptable. So if you're going to manage one team, you need to manage that other side with the same sort of level of interaction. So on that one, the referee gets a little cheeky, shuts his mic off, has a quiet word. But if you're going to be fair, I don't think anyone in that stadium would have an issue if you reverse the penalty for slapping a player on the back of the head, as long as you just storyboard it and you lay it out as to what's happening. So no issue if you just explain time off. I would have given you the penalty, but you took the law into your own hands. It's unacceptable. There'd be no more of that. You go back 10, and I'm reversing the penalty. If you build it in that approach, you shouldn't have any issues. If you just say, that's not acceptable, you're out of here, get back 10, and blow the whistle, players aren't really going to understand, and teams aren't really going to understand what the heck you're talking about. So again, every interaction with the captain has a positive or negative outcome. You just want to make sure you're having an even approach and you're keeping it friendly on the field. Scott, you and I talked about this earlier today. It's again going back to kind of a way you could build rapport, wouldn't you say?
Yeah, definitely. It's part of refereeing is knowing the laws and applying the laws fairly. The other part is how well we manage people in general, and it's a really great skill to develop. So yeah, exactly. I think the storyboarding idea is a great way to sell your calls. If you storyboard well, you're basically just building up to the final call where so everyone knows what you're talking about at a tackle situation. And maybe if you told players to roll away when you penalise, I've told you to roll away. This is the second time now. If you do it again, so on and so forth. That's a great way to storyboard something, so it's no surprise when you end up sending someone off.
Yeah, I mean, if you get in a situation where you haven't really built up the situation, you haven't put a team on warning, then to give like a random card, sometimes it just seems out of place. Now that there's a difference between deliberate. Deliberate is something that's completely different, and if we get into deliberate situations where, especially down by the goal line or cynical infringements, those are a little bit different. Those don't necessarily need the buildup. But if you get into situations like on that previous clip, where if the white team, as you can see here, so the refs told them to have a word. If they had one more infringement, if white has one more infringement in this area, it's no secret as to what would happen in this situation. Now, the card was probably never going to come out in this game. This was the America's Combine team in white, and most of them were sort of like fake threatened by their team coach. If they got a yellow card, they probably wouldn't get a contract. So they were on their best behavior in this situation, which is also the reason why you never really saw any retaliation from the slap. So if this is a game, say this is Burr Field and this is Austin Blacks versus the Dallas Reds, I don't think you would get the same outcome where everyone just stands up quietly and goes to their respective ends of the penalty. If you don't handle this with sort of a firm approach to this kind of behavior, in this case, smacking a player who is in an illegal position, but we don't want players, taking the law into their own hands. So if you take that approach in a game where you're casual about foul play and little incidents like this leads to big stuff, big fights, and you might have some problems on your hands. So, as we talked about in our regional meetings, where we talked about pre-match chats and dealing with players in certain situations. So we threw out a couple scenarios in our meetings around situational plays where certain team had three infringements, 3 tackle infringements, all in their own half in the last 5 minutes, and we told everybody to have a go at what they would say to a captain. So the brave folks that were able to step up and do that in our meetings just spit something out, and that's great because most of the time we're just in a game. If you're not prepared for what's going to come out of your mouth, then you're probably just going to, what we have here, you're just going to wing it. So if you're going to choose your words and you get in certain situations, think about scripting your dialogue. Be prepared for any situation. I mean, you can write down on a piece of paper the amount of reasons that you would require you to, manage a team or manage a certain player or manage a captain. So, for instance, not rolling away 3 times in a row, or a deliberate infringement, or a tip tackle, or an offside, too many offside penalties or something like that. So I think what you find as referees get into higher levels, they often work off of the script. I know, Scott, this is something that you've kind of been working on recently, and myself as well. Can you just kind of talk about the importance of working off of a script and why that's probably a good idea compared to just winging it?
Yeah, well, I think at the end of the day, we can all agree that when you're under pressure, maybe we don't speak as clearly as we want to, and when we go back and listen to the audio, most of the times we're sort of holding our head in our hand, a little bit embarrassed about what we said, because it usually doesn't come out very clear. Like what we think we're saying or what we're trying to get across does not come across at all. So you can start it with the simple stuff. So this is what I'd recommend to the newer referees that are on the call tonight, that I would start by simply scripting my pre-match front row chat, writing that down and trying to commit that to your memory. I would also write down and script my captain talk that I have with my 2 captains for the match. So in those situations, at the very least, when you're having the talk, you can come across like you're confident and in control, and you're not mixing your words or misspeaking or not saying enough, or missing important points. So that's where I'd start the scripting it. Then from moving on from the pre-match stuff and into the game, it's really just about having key ideas and building on those ideas. And Derek touched on it just before. Basically, when I'm speaking to a captain or to a player, we want them to know what we've seen, what we want them to do, or what they've done, what we want them to do, and what's going to happen if they don't follow these instructions. So you're not rolling at the tackle. You must roll away, and if you don't, etc., etc. So you can sort of build around those themes and just add to it. The other times where it's really important to have some type of script that you can sort of rely on is when you're blowing time off and giving final warnings. It's important to have an understanding, a basic understanding of what message you want to deliver. And again, it sort of goes around the storyboarding idea that Derek talked about, where if you storyboard up to a certain point about the tackle, let's say repeat infringements at the tackle, you know, you've storyboarded that really well. You've blown time off. You said next time, or you've given your warning, and then you can talk to the captain and just have send a clear message. Now, when you're under pressure and you're fatigued or you're stressed, that message might not be delivered all that well. So it's something that's a good thing to do in your downtime, when you're not at the gym. Maybe when you're watching a game of rugby, you can listen to what the other referees are saying and sort of steal from them. And yeah, that's really the basic idea behind scripting.
Yeah, I mean, especially in situations where your heart rate is up and you've just run 30 meters or something like that, and you've got the penalty, you've got the player, you know what you're going to say, but to kind of deliver a calm, composed, even-keeled sentence is sometimes easier said than done. And I mean, I've been there where you sound rushed and you sound tired, even though maybe you're not, but it just comes off in that way. So it's a good time to, especially if you know exactly what's going to come out, then to give yourself a little bit of time. We'll talk about a little bit later situations where you can give yourself a little bit of time, but if you're prepared and you know what you're going to say, then that's just going to help you that much more. So one of the things we kind of heard in our regional discussions is oftentimes you hear referees say no option. So no option, or sometimes when you get into those situations where you just tell a player to clean it up. So clean it up, and there's no option. So it's not really something you want to put yourself into that spot. So here's a scenario where no option maybe wasn't the best situation. 45 minutes, blue team has issued a warning for high tackles. 1 minute later, player A is subbed on for blue. He's played a whole minute and 20 seconds, and then he's penalized for a high tackle, which maybe wasn't necessarily the worst high tackle you've ever seen in the game, but the referee said no more high tackles, so he's issued a yellow card. A couple minutes later, blue teams issued a warning for repeated tackle infringements. Again, the referee has said no option. Player A returns to the field after his sin bin is up. And then at 58, he's been on the field for a whole 30 seconds, and they're penalized for not rolling away. Now, you don't have to be a genius to guess what happens next. So we get into the situation where this player is issued a yellow card and then a red card. So think of it in this situation. Player A drove 3 hours to play 1 minute and 50 seconds of rugby. Now you might think to yourself, maybe that's not really my problem. But especially in games like high school games or D2 or D3, some of the lower level rugby that we see on the weekends, we just want to be aware of situations where maybe we didn't have to give a second yellow card, or maybe I didn't have to box myself in the corner. I mean, sometimes if a team's infringing under pressure, say we go back to that last clip, if that white team had another penalty, they're going to get a yellow card. You might get in a situation where if a guy had another player had a yellow and you wanted to give a second yellow and maybe you didn't want to, you might say, well, okay, now for real, this is really my last warning. I mean, you don't want to get into that necessarily, but you always have an option. You always have a situation where maybe you don't need to give this penalty. Maybe you could give an unplayable. Maybe you could have a little bit of empathy, or maybe you could issue a penalty the other way, if possible. If it's unclear, but you don't want to necessarily box yourself into the corners where you have to give cards and you have to send players off. It's just not something that is going to work out well in the long term. Scott, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I agree with everything you said there, Derek, and the scenario happens fairly often.
Yeah.
in a game. And, you know, look, sometimes you have to issue a card, you don't have any option. I think the point that Derek's really trying to make is that you usually have more options available to you than you realize. And what I would challenge the referees to do is to look at their games, especially if they've had, you know, 3, 4, 5 cards in it, and maybe go back and reflect on what could I have done differently in the game to save a few cards, and not issue the cards as anything that I could have done. Now, as was said, if it's these dangerous high tackles going around, sometimes, you know, you go to a high school match and everyone's taking everyone's heads off and you can't help but card people. But just thinking around the repeat infringement cards, I think is our biggest opportunity as referees to, you know, challenge ourselves and to see what we could maybe do differently to keep players on the field. Because it's a really great point that, you know, when you're out there refereeing amateur rugby or community rugby, you know, some of these guys have put in 12 hours during the week at training and traveling, and, you know, they're sacrificing time with their family, and then we sort of go out there and through maybe some mismanagement on our part, we put them on the side of the field and they don't get to play the rugby. So, you know, at the end of the day, 15 on 15 is the best way to play a game of rugby. And, you know, I think we owe it to the rugby community. And to be a better referee, you have to look at your performance and see what I could have done differently.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, not to say don't give cards, because we're going to talk about situations where you don't really, you know, that are unavoidable, but have a bit of common sense. And I know common sense isn't always that common, but just something to think about when you get in situations, especially like you said, at lower level, high school rugby. It's just something where players get a little bit aggressive, and maybe those tackles do slip up a little bit, but you don't want to necessarily, you know, compound the issue by chucking somebody off the field if they don't even understand what the call was necessarily for. So think of this as like a learning moment. Now, I mean, you might have this happen. It's very possible. I have seen this in a game. This was a situation at Club 7's finals like 10 years ago, I believe, where a player was put into this situation. So it could happen. You know, I would say the best way to probably never have this happen to you is to experience it yourself and then go from there. But just a bit of common sense and trying to keep players on the field as much as you can, based on the level of play as well. Cool. So we'll get into this is just kind of a logistical matter when we're given penalties. Just something to think about. Take control of the situation. So be aware of where the ball is, blowing the penalty, calling time off, making sure play is completely stopped. If you have a situation where you need to speak with your AR, do that, but just take control of the situation and make sure that all 30 players on the field are aware that time is off and will not restart until you say so.
So Noah. Strong running. On the hands. Oh, it's a high shot. Surely be brought back for a penalty. Referee allows it. Play on. Is Belmont sure? Get themselves into the red zone.
Penalty advantage, Belmont.
Mystic River.
Penalty advantage, Belmont.
Penalty advantage to Belmont. So they have really good control.
So the penalty's been given. In this situation, TMO is being used. So just, again, really important to make sure that everyone on the field knows that time is off.
Aggression, good result.
Show me again.
Well, the referee's still, I don't think he knows they're kicking for goal here because the referee's looking at the scoreboard. Danny Thomas is looking to kick this.
Guys, time was off. I'm doing TMO. Guys, time was off. I said time.
So you see this all the time where players get a little bit over anxious. I'm not necessarily convinced that was the situation here, but same thing at lower level, local club matches. Players don't understand that time is off. They just want the penalty. Whoever's taking the kick might get a little overzealous, and they really want to kick it because they're going to smash it into the corner or whatever. But just make sure you're taking control of the situation and doing the process correctly. So we'll talk about some processes basically tonight. That's mainly what we're going to touch on. Take control of the situation. Time's off. Eye contact with whoever the kicker is or the captain or whatever you need to do, but just making sure that everybody knows that time's off and I need to go manage this situation or speak with the captain or speak with another player. You could really kind of lose it. I wouldn't say lose control, but it just looks a little bit messy. And the worst thing in the world is to have a guy have to bring back a player to kick again when they've already kicked for the corner, or in this case, kick for posts.
I'm sorry. Come on, back.
So I think we're looking for if that's high tackle is going to be a penalty.
So disagree, agree with the call, whatever. Just take control of the situation, and you control the time. So this other one, we'll talk about the process of giving a card. So this point was brought up when we had our Austin meeting. It's not sevens. In 7 situations, a quick card maybe in certain situations is okay. You don't need to do the whole dog and pony show and call in a captain, but at least make sure you make eye contact with the player, let the dust settle, look at him, give the card, explain the infringement, and then everyone understands who the card is for and what it is for. When you kind of rush the situation, it can look something similar to what we have coming up.
Goes forward again. And he's taken just shy of the 40 here of the Glendale Raptors. TRRA, Biden's. Great tip on from Biden. And now reaching into the pocket, Brian, as well. Contact with the neck. Yellow card.
No hesitation at all. Casey Rock gets to the bin. Huge break for Nola Gold early in this contest.
Direct contact with the neck. Number 4. Can you go to the bin, please? Yeah.
Casey Rock,
not quite sure if he was the guilty party there. No, he stuck an arm out. Have a look on the replay.
He's never been to the bin before, it looks like.
So agree, disagree with the call, doesn't really matter, but just making sure that, again, you're taking your time. These are situations where you have time to sort of not necessarily build up the suspense, but just sort of make a show of it if you want to. This is a way that you can kind of communicate to everyone in the game and people watching the game, how you're controlling this match. So not necessarily a situation where you need to call time and call in a captain and do the whole thing, like I said, but at least wait until the player is up and is looking at you, and then you give them the card. Scott, anything to add on that one?
No, I think you've covered it really well there. Just, as you said, that's when you blow time off, people are going to be looking at you, and it's your time to deliver a good, clear message.
Yeah.
Take your time, take a deep breath, think about what you're going to say, and go from there.
Yeah. So this next clip we'll get into, this is more about just kind of how you would handle a scrap situation. This was in an international 2 years ago, but this is not something that would be uncommon to see in a local match. Say a game out at Nixon Lane or something like that. Just think to yourself how you would handle this if you were just the referee and you were by yourself, or if you had a team of 3.
To the back, well fielded. It's over. Maul is set here for Canada. Buckwell at the back. There's Buckwell, comes off now. McCrory finds the blindside winger. Nice little flat pass there to Moore. Bookie Boom. He's picked up and driven back into the turf. And the counter ruck comes in from Uruguay. And the turnover. Oh, and now the argy-bargy. As the boys are restless. And they've come pouring in from all parts of the field. No need for introductions, gentlemen. And referee Derek Summers, he's going to have his hands full early on here, James, with this.
Yeah, a bit of colorful language in there as well. So, whether you know who started this, whether you know who finished it, doesn't necessarily matter. If you can get sort of the culprits in the matter, great. If you can't, that's okay. Oftentimes, especially in fast situations like this where it's just a mass of bodies and you're not entirely sure who popped it off, it's just a good idea to take control of the situation. At the very least, we're going to speak to at least 2 people. We're going to speak to both captains of the teams. At a maximum, we're calling in the initial offenders for each side. One of the common terms that we've had over the last, since I've started refereeing, people have said, well, third man in needs a card or something like that. That's a bit of an old school mentality and not necessarily an absolute, but if you get in a situation where 2 players are having a little bit of just a little bit of handbags or argy-bargy, whatever you want to call it, it's your opportunity to blow the whistle. Oftentimes you blow it as loud as you can to try to get them to stop. If they carry on, that's fine. Let them get that out of their system. If you have a player who's running in, as clear as day from 30 or so meters, comes in, takes a pop at somebody, then that's a situation where third man in would be appropriate. But you don't necessarily need to single players out because what do we have here? We have 2 players on the ground. If I'll go back and play it again, just watch number 2 for the red team.
He's picked up and driven back into the turf. And the counter ruck comes in from Uruguay.
So something happens, they're on the ground. I don't know what started it. I don't know what finished it, whatever. But at the very least, you need to get a handle on the situation. So like I said, you need to call time, let the dust settle. They might carry on. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. But you need to set the stall up at the end of this scrap that this kind of behavior is unacceptable. If you notice on the game clock, we're 2 minutes into the game. So we got 78 minutes of rugby left in this one. And if this isn't, if the referee, in this case, this was myself, if I don't get a handle on this situation, I'm going to have some serious problems. So at the very minimum, calling in 2 captains, explaining to them, we've had a situation early in the game. I don't know who started it. I don't care who finished it. This behavior is unacceptable. I need you to speak with your teams. If we have another incident, I'm just going to yellow card someone and send them to the bin. Can you sort that out? Sort that out. I think anybody that has watched either Super Rugby or the Rugby Championship the last couple of years, Jaco Piper used to do a thing where he would basically take a captain's consensus early in the game, and he would say, I don't care who started it, but if it happens again, are you okay if I just yellow card the next infringement? I wouldn't necessarily go down that route, but you need to get a handle on it. So in this situation, 2 red and 9 blue are sort of the instigators, so you could call them in as well. It's just an opportunity for you to take control of the matter. A bit of dressing down. I'm not telling you need to speak to them like they're kids, but however you want to deliver that message, again, going back to your script, however you want to deliver that message that this behavior is unacceptable and we need to get on with the game. Scotty, what do you think?
Yeah, this all ties back into the hour before the match and building that rapport with the captains and the team, and this is when it really becomes quite useful. And I think as long as if you get your message across that once you blow the whistle, you're expecting the captain to come in and start doing his job, which his job is to control his players on the field. So, whether you deliver that message or how you deliver that message is up to the individual. But yeah, your points are all good there.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, again, it's something you'll see in a game of rugby, no matter where you go. Fighting has no place in the game, but in an environment like a rugby match, players get aggressive. It's going to happen, and it's just something that you need to be able to control that situation however you feel necessary. If you think yellow cards in those situations are going to gain you control, great. If you think just a stern warning and getting your message across clearly will keep control, perfect. The key thing around making a big decision like that is gaining control of the match and in a way that we can carry on. So we'll talk about here. This is kind of another situation where referee could, assess the whole situation. So we have a bit of foul play. There's an injury involved. Plenty of time to assess everything and factor in it all. So there's a late shot, immediate penalty. There's an injury. So this is a great opportunity for the referee to do a call. It's called time. Separated the teams. Everyone knows it's a penalty. Everyone knows a card's probably coming. They're just not sure what color. So we have an AR on the far touchline. Great opportunity to go over, speak with the AR. Whether they saw it or not doesn't necessarily matter. If you got a clear view of it, then happy days. But just go over there, have a word with them. Maybe they might have a second opinion, or maybe they might reinforce your opinion. Again, there's an injury on the field, so play's probably not going to restart anytime soon. It's just another opportunity to kind of build that drama and compose yourself more than anything, and then deliver your decision. Pretty straightforward. Don't necessarily need to get too much into it. I think in this situation, what the referee does is they give a quick yellow card. Whether you think it's a yellow card or a red card, I personally think it's probably a red card just based on the outcome and the fact that the player that was hit missed 3 weeks. But that doesn't necessarily matter. It's just something to think about. When you get players in situations of foul play. So if I'm the yellow team and if I'm in this case, the yellow 7, I'll gladly sit down for 10 minutes if it means that this team starting fly half then misses the rest of the game. So just one of those situations where you might want to take in all the factors. And again, just by giving yourself all the time in the world because you have an injury, so we have sort of a natural stoppage for you to take your time. Just assess the situation. Let everybody kind of cool off. Let the black team sort of cool off as well. Gold chills out. Then you call in the player and the captain, explain your decision. Or it's a clear late tackle, no wrap on the kicker. It's unacceptable. It's a yellow card or it's a red card, and then we restart with play. Same situation here. We got a red card situation. So just kind of pay attention to how the referee diffuses the situation. Everyone on the field and in the parking lot, everyone all over knows what the decision's going to be. But just ask yourself, what the referee did well to diffuse the situation, sort of calm everybody down and deliver a really tough call. I mean, it's never easy to give a red card. I could probably count on one hand how many red cards I've ever given. But if you give them like this, you're not going to have any problems.
Get up there, Brady! Brady, go up and get him! You guys are waiting for them!
Oh, you had a big sin there.
Yeah, I mean, not really a situation where you can debate it, but again, you have a stoppage here. Everyone knows it's a penalty. Diffuse the situation, separate the teams, call in the captain, be formal about it, and then issue the red card. It's just one of those things that if you rush it, you're going to find that the play is just going to be a little bit It's just a little bit sloppy if you rush those kind of decisions. So we don't get the full shot here. It cuts. It's edited video, but really good how the referee diffuses the whole situation, separates it, brings in the offender with the captain, explains their decision, and then issues the card. Scotty, anything to add for that?
No, not really. It's always going to be tough to red card someone. It's just about taking your time, taking a deep breath, getting some oxygen to your brain.
Yeah.
And, again, just going back to some of those earlier points about developing a script.
Yeah.
These behaviours are unacceptable in the game of rugby, or talking to a referee this way is unacceptable in the game of rugby, or whatever your catchphrase is. This is a time when it pays off. All the practicing you're doing while you're driving in the car. This is a time when you come across like you're in control.
Yeah.
Because if you mishandle these situations, chaos can follow. Right behind that. So it's really important that you have your script sorted out. Big deep breath. Use all the resources available to you, whether it's an AR, to take a bit of time off. Like Derek was saying, if there's an injury, it's a great time just to, before you make a decision, using the minutes around the injury to sort of think about what you saw, process, before you go and deliver your big card.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just about the process of giving it. You just want to be really crisp on your process. That's something that we always talk about. Control the controllables. That's what you can control. You control yourself in that situation. You don't have any control over what the player's actions were, but once you've blown the whistle, given the penalty, and made up in your mind what you're going to do, that's when you step in. And if you're aware of your process and you've practiced it either in a game before, or when you're by yourself, or you're in front of a mirror or something, it's never the worst thing in the world. Driving to the game where you're talking to yourself, going over certain situations in your head, or verbally, and you're prepared. So when you're prepared, then it's going to come off well. So we'll get into penalty tries. I don't know if we're going to get through everything here. I'm going to try to get us out at least as close to 8 as possible. So we'll go over penalty tries and then deliberate knock-ons, and then maybe we'll see how far we can get through. Penalty try, this is just taken straight from the law book, the simplified law book. Opinion of the referee, a try probably would have been scored, or scored in a more advantageous position, if not for an act of foul play. Player guilty of this must be cautioned and temporarily suspended or sent off. Now, a key word in there is a player. So if it's a situation, say a scrum, you can't necessarily put it on one single person, then a yellow card is not required. So pretty straightforward. Just making sure we're all square on that process. So we're not. You don't necessarily have to go hunting for a player to send to the bin if you're going to give a penalty try off of a scrum. So again, just going over the process, making sure we get the process correct. One of the things we talked about in our regional meetings is sort of expected outcome. So just ask yourself in the situation, like when the ball is kicked, where is the last defender? Who is the last defender? Where's the nearest attacker? And then what might happen next?
Put together all the Barbarians if they need to get more points. Out into the pocket. Flat ball. Oh, huge tackle here on Bertrand. Double team. They've got numbers left and right.
Apologies for the quality of video.
To Oxwell. Who's running onto... No, it's a rat! Unbelievable! Elliot double heads off with a kick through. It's up for Rice.
So we'll just pause it right there. Like we said, expected outcome. We have the last defender just inside the 22. We have the only attacker within region, within the area, and then the ball's hanging up.
The ball bounced up. Unbelievable high tackle on Elliot. Oh, it's a building try. Now seen it all. Keep the change. Put another log in the fire. This game is warming up. Can you believe it? Elliot just started again.
So we'll just play it all the way through again.
To Oxwell. Who's running onto... No, it's a rat. Unbelievable. Elliot double heads off with a kick through. It's up for Rice. Who will win it? The ball bounced up. Unbelievable high tackle on Elliot. Oh, it's a building try. Put together all the Barbarians if they need to get more points. Oh, it's a building try.
So just making sure you do the process correct. Again, whistle goes immediately. Run onto the sticks if it's an open field situation. Run onto the sticks to award the penalty try.
An unbelievable try. It's a yellow card, right?
Then a double whistle for time off. Call in the offender. Explain your decision. Issue the card. And then we restart play as normal. We do not restart with a penalty because it's a penalty try before the try was scored. It's not after the try was scored. So everybody just clear with that. Big whistle at the beginning. Run under the sticks. Double whistle to call time off. Calling into the offender. Explain the decision. Then issue the card. We don't want to have a situation where we blow the whistle, stand there, issue the card, and then go run on the sticks. You might have a second or two where you might have to think for a second and make a decision, but you go in and award the try first, then go back and issue the card. Pretty straightforward. Just want to make sure everybody's aware of the proper process on how to do that in an open field try. See this sort of in all kinds of different ways. We might be able to get to one of the clips when you have a situation where the AR flags something. So if you get in a situation like that where you have a conversation with the AR, come to your decision, then run under the sticks, award the try, then call in the offender. You don't want to, like I said, do it out of order. It just is confusing. And yeah. So we're in a scrum. Scrum penalty try. Oops, sorry. So kind of ask yourself what would happen in certain situations. We are a 5-meter scrum. What does a pushover penalty try look like, and what maybe it doesn't look like? So if we're in a situation here from the blue team, I'm looking for ball in, ball out, clean attack, or if I have a strong scrum, to push the white team over the line. So pretty good drive by the Navy team. Looks like they might score and then are penalized for a ball carrier holding on. And again, like we talked about, where you're checking the field before the game, multiple lines on the field, so being aware of where the goal line is always a good idea. So now just compare this call, which is a no penalty try, to the one we're about to show here. So again, going back to our definitions, just making sure a try would have probably been scored if not for an act of foul play. In this case, we would call it scrummaging, deliberately infringing. Pretty hard sell on one, maybe an easier sell on the first one. So just something to think about. And then this last one, you want to at least make sure that the play ends. So allowing the play to go on as much as you can by maybe playing advantage is not the worst thing in the world, and maybe takes the decision out of your hands. So ask yourself as you watch this replay, was a try scored already?
Rugby scrum, it's a great little bit of vision. As you see, 8 rugby players packing in down against a Formula One car. Now,
Crouch!
I won't give away the ending, but it's pro rugby.
Mine!
He's really going to be looking here to see, make sure the loose head just really holds the drive and stays square.
And they're trying their best, San Diego. Put the power here from the Seawolves too much, and there's a penalty try.
So right under the post. So what happened there was a great drive by Seattle, and then Seattle, as they...
So you can see the Seattle team has a pretty good drive on. The scrum does wheel, so no debate that there is an infringement. But again, the try does get scored already. So, when you're in a situation where you want to give the penalty try, at least let it play out before deciding. So it's yellow lines is the goal line. Try was scored. This is a situation where we're talking about mauls. I'll try to get to your guys' questions quickly. We'll talk about mauls, and then we'll talk about just the deliberate knock-ons, and then I think we're going to have to jump off. So just a situation on how to do the process of awarding a penalty try around a maul. It's about 15 meters out. Pretty good drive by the goal team. It's moving. They would probably score. Then it collapses on the line or close to the line. So again, big whistle running under the sticks. It's off camera, and then the referee comes back. They have their offender, singled them out. Singled them out, spoken to them, and then issues the card. So you see the referee return on camera, given their decision, and then issued the card. Now you might ask yourself, we get in situations where there might be a fight or something like that. That's why it's just really important you get a big loud whistle so everyone knows that play is stopped. So as loud as you can, and then you go under the sticks to award the try. And then, like I said, if you have a specific player on this kind of a play, you single them out, bring it back with a double whistle, and then issue the card. Pretty straightforward. Deliberate knock-ons. Player must not intentionally knock the ball forward with hand or arm. Sanction is a penalty. It is not an intentional knock-on if, in the act of trying to catch the ball, the player knocks on, provided that there was a reasonable expectation they could gain possession. So essentially, if you run the risk of throwing an arm out there to try to catch the ball, in my opinion, and this is where the law is very gray, you run the risk of being penalized. So you take the risk and you don't catch it, then you're going to be penalized. If we get in a situation where, again, we go back to whether a try would have been scored or not, then we're talking penalty try. So if in terms of giving cards or not giving cards, if it prevented a line break, so if the act of a deliberate knock-on prevented a team from breaking the gain line and having a strong attack, then that's where we're talking about yellow cards. If it was a situation where it's just a slap down, but there was defensive cover in the area where that would have prevented a line break, then we're talking about just a penalty. And like we said, if it's a possibility that they might have caught the ball, then we're just calling a scrum.
Into the middle of the field. Oh, the replacement Ing. So close. The Arrows need to score right now, and they're back in the game. Over the top, nearly an intercept, and that deflection was enough to keep it out of the hand, but they're still alive. Here come the Arrows. It's going to be a try. No.
Blown up.
So I'll play it again.
Oh, the replacement Ing. So close. The Arrows need to score right now, and they're back in the game. Over the top, nearly an intercept, and that deflection was enough to keep it out of the hand, but they're still alive. Here come the Arrows. It's going to be a try. No.
Blown up. Looks like it was blown up before.
Referee coming.
So whether or not they would have scored in that situation, you could call into question. They probably would have scored in a more advantageous position. So we've got a clear overlap. Players, like I said, he's thrown the arm out. He runs the risk of being penalized. He is correctly penalized, and a penalty try and yellow card is issued. So pretty straightforward. Not a whole lot of debate around that. Let me see if I can get to some of these questions. What's the best guide to talk to player versus captain for either a card or a tough penalty? Good question, Pascal. Really kind of a situation of how much control needs to be taken. So, if it's a team infringement or a team warning is going to be issued, you're probably going to have a lot more better buy-in or management opportunity with the captain to bring them in. So it's a situation where it's a couple of infringements in a row in a certain area or a certain type of infringement, then that's an opportunity where you'd speak with a captain. If it's a player who maybe found himself in an unlucky penalty or was doing something that might have been a little bit cheeky, then that's an opportunity to have a direct conversation with them. So if somebody is just off their feet and then tries to play the ball out of the scrum half's hands, something deliberate like that, then you could just either give them a yellow card or something like that. Yeah, that would be the difference for me as to dealing with the captain versus just dealing directly with the player. Question here from Jonathan regarding the life late hit. So the injury doesn't necessarily mean, it doesn't factor into the decision. I mean, if a player was hit like that and then they were perfectly fine, that doesn't mean that the decision should be any less than it probably could be. So if I'm going to tip tackle a player, I'm going to turn them on their side and they're going to land on their head, it's pretty straightforward that that's a red card. Whether or not that player gets up shouldn't factor into it. If we go back to the red card tip tackle that we saw in that high school game, that player was fine, so there was no injury in that. So that doesn't factor in. The law is not specific on results. So don't necessarily look at the result. So the first thing to think about is the facts. So the facts being, in this situation with the life team, is it a late hit? Yes. Is it leading with the shoulder? Yes. Is it to the head neck area? Probably. Video's a little bit dodgy, but probably. So just factoring in that, and again, going back to how you sort of sell your decision, if you explain it in those terms, with the captain and the player. So I've seen a late hit directly to the kicker's head and neck area. It's a clear shoulder. For me, it's a red card, and then you explain your decision. If you're not going to lay out your decision clearly, to the teams, and you're going to give sort of a wishy-washy answer, and then just issue the card, then you're not going to have a whole lot of buy-in. So injury doesn't necessarily factor in, but you got to take in all the factors. So you got to think of everything that happened. So assessing the injury, assessing the temperament on the field, so the team reactions. So if there's maybe a fight popped off, then okay, this is a situation where I need to get a better handle on the game. And like we said, circling back to the beginning, control is our biggest. Our biggest issue. So we want to focus on getting control and keeping control. So you might think red card gets me the best control. So hopefully that answered your question. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it was not a scenario where you would have known that the player was going to miss 3 weeks, but it's something to factor in. This guy is seriously messed up, and they just lost. Say it's a quarterback. If we're talking about football, they just lost their best player. They just lost their fly half, and then this guy is going to sit for 10 minutes. I don't necessarily think that's a fair trade. So just want to make sure you factor in all the elements of the play. Cool. Just go over one more. We'll just show this last one, and then we'll get out of here.
On 14, Audsley takes on the line and he's put back in his box. The ball was lifted. Parkinson. Oh, hip throw. Putty Parkinson. He's tried to end Davies. It's a body slam.
Just go with the facts. So the facts are he's played the 9. He's picked the 9 up. He's turned him sideways. He's sort of hip thrown him. It's like a professional wrestling move. And then the 9's landed on his back, and the head of the 9 has hit the ground. Again, not necessarily factoring in injury or whatnot. The 9 did miss a couple of weeks from the international test window, but just think about all the factors, and if you can explain that in a way where people will buy your decision. Listen, you played the 9 late, you've picked him up, you've turned him, you've slammed him in the ground in a dangerous position. It's not a rugby move. This is not professional wrestling. This is a red card. Off you go. If you sold it in that kind of way, then you've kept control of the situation. If you've given just a penalty in this situation, or maybe you haven't thrown in all the factors, then if you're trying to keep rapport or keep control with the white team, then the white team now thinks, okay, this is a dangerous referee. This referee doesn't have our back. So it's just something to think about. Whether you go red or yellow, control is going to be the issue, and it's a big decision either way. But it's something you just kind of have to have a handle on. So if you got any other questions, try to get those in. Happy to answer them as quickly as I can. I think we got most of them. Wind in the background surrounded. Sorry if the audio was pretty bad. Just to circle back, working on your scripts. So taking the time, doing your homework. Throughout the week, having a good idea as to what you might say in certain situations. I mean, you could think of situations on the field, like I said, throughout the game where you might need to speak with a player or speak with the captain. It's just a good idea to have a key set of phrases available to go to. Working on positive captain interactions. Like we said, every interaction with the captain or a player is going to be a positive or negative outcome. So if you don't care, if you're a referee that's going to step on the field and you're in your opinion, you're the boss and that's all that matters, then great. You don't really this doesn't really apply to you, but if you're somebody who's trying to work with individuals and get a good outcome and have a decent Saturday afternoon, then it might be important for you to build a bit of rapport and build a working relationship with these players and coaches. So just think of it that way, and then go from there. And then again, going back to these big decisions, just factoring in all the issues or everything that happened, taking your time, assessing the whole situation, knowing what's going to come out of your mouth, and then delivering your decision to the public. So taking your time, control the controllables, and try to keep control of the game as much as you can. So I appreciate everybody joining us tonight. This is probably the earliest we've gotten out of here in a while. So, with that said, enjoy your weekend. We will